Next, we will have, I want to introduce the wonderful pastor and his team from Sutherland Springs that will be here. Pastor Frank Pomeron and David Colbath Katy Quinney. I want to invite you to come out, please. And let's give them a great hand for being here this morning. And this is Miss Mary Beth that will lead us with a Q&A with them, okay?
Good morning, everybody. We're very pleased today to have some distinguished guests with us, and I'd like to first introduce them as they are representative of the community in Sutherland Springs, particularly the First Baptist Church where the tragedy took place, as well as our victim advocate. And I'll start first with Katy Quinney. Katy is the Wilson County District Attorney's victim advocate and played a very critical role during the recovery process after the shooting. Next to Katy, we have David Colbath. David is a long-standing community member and member of the First Baptist Church of Sutherland Springs. David was in the church. He was wounded in the church. He is a survivor, and we'll hear from David shortly. And next to David is Reverend Frank Pomeron, who pastors, senior pastor of the First Baptist Church of Sutherland Springs. Gentlemen and ladies, we're grateful for you being here with us today. We'd like to start first with a question for you, Pastor Pomeroy. Can you tell us how things are now in Sutherland Springs?
Well, I think the answer to that would be that we are recovering very well. God has been blessing us immensely out there. Now, that being said, everyone still has a point on that trajectory of grief that is different. Some are further along in their grief than others. But as a whole, we are still healing. We are communicating. We're coming together. And you can see growth happening both physically and spiritually and primarily emotionally still there in Sutherland Springs.
Right. My impression being out in Sutherland Springs that afternoon after the tragedy occurred was that the community was a faithful community. It was very frequent that we saw people gathering at the Family Assistance Center, joining hands and praying.
We tend to say that the tragedy does not define us. We were a close-knit community, both as a church and as a community, even prior to, and we still are thereafter. Even those within the community that didn't attend our church still would come for the fall festivals and gathering, meals, things of this nature. The church was the center of the community in many, many ways. And because of that, the entire community put faith beyond themselves and put their faith in something greater than themselves. Therefore, in the midst of the tragedy, that faith sustained us, and it's that faith now thereafter that's helping us to grow and to heal.
Sure. Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
And David, tell us about how the survivors are doing now. Pastor Pomeroy touched on that, but can you tell us your fellow members and those that were present that tragic day?
Well, I think as a whole, again, most of us are in a continual healing. I don't know if maybe somebody's never been close to somebody in a tragedy or been involved with a tragedy, if they realize the time is not the answer. Though you hear that in the secular world, time doesn't heal everything. We do believe that God does, though. But some of us are still mightily struggling. I will admit that. Most of us are still in the church. A couple have moved away. But as a whole, when help is needed, as you know, there's some great counseling that is available now, and a lot of good godly counseling also. And as you mentioned about the community, I don't know of anybody that is in a standalone situation. Everybody has somebody, if they just make a phone call. And a lot of us don't have to make a phone call. We can see when we're struggling with something. And I'm by no means making our community out to be perfect, because we are far from that. But we are a good community, and we're a good, loving community. And I think the answer would be we're doing better. And in the long view, I think we will continue to do better.
Thank you. Thank you. And Katy. Katy lives very near Sutherland Springs, also had a active role in law enforcement as the victim advocate in Wilson County. Tell us about your experience when you got the word.
I think for me, I live 3 miles from the church. I've worked with Frank on some other things with the church and rest stops, and I knew Sherry, and I knew several other people in the church. I just didn't realize who all I knew until the following days, when people kind of started trickling into our Victim Assistance Center. So for me, it was just a matter of trying to be there for them. And the FBI Victim Services people and DPS Victim Services came in very quickly and just allowed me to be a part of them and to get to hug, because I'm a hugger. And so that, was easy to comfort people. And I got to do that more than anything else. The paperwork, they were taken care of. So for me, it was good to be able to be there and to continue to be only a phone call away and drive down the street or something like that to everybody that's still healing. But it has been phenomenal to watch them heal. And so when I'm asked how my community and the church is doing, for me, I very loudly and proudly say that they are very good, and they've made sure that our community has healed as a whole from the inside out.
Amen. Thank you. We know that we're coming up on the 2-year anniversary of this tragic event, and so much has been lost, and the faithfulness and the strength of the survivors has just continued to deepen and grow, and I've heard David speak to that point. Pastor, you lost a daughter in the tragedy, as well as many dear friends and members of your church. What today is your biggest challenge?
Let me kind of springboard off what Katy just said. She said it somewhat jokingly, but it really is a very imperative part of healing, and that is she is a hugger. Therefore, one of the greatest things that happened during the tragedy was that we chose not to politicize, but to go and put hands and touch and feel and just love people. That's what everybody needed, was to know that I'm not alone. I'm going to get through this. And that included myself and my family, who, I'll be honest, some of my other kids are still desperately dealing with the loss of Belle and others within the church. So when you ask me what is the challenge today, that challenge today is to continue to be that touchstone, to continue to remind people, let's not allow the media, let's not allow the outside sources, I'm not saying that we need to isolate ourselves. However, we need to buffer ourselves with the grace and mercy of God to be able to continue to reach out to others and be the hands and feet of grace and mercy to others. That can still, even after 2 years, be a difficult task when memories come up or our own trials and tribulations come into way, and we have to stop and remember it's not about the circumstance. It's not about what happened. It's about moving forward, and moving forward such as whether it be Santa Fe, whether it be El Paso, whether it be in Ohio, it means reaching out to them too. And then even closer, it may not be that large of a tragedy, but tragedy befalls everyone. And if we can continue to show the grace and the mercy of human compassion to one another, that's what heals far better than the politicization and drawing faction lines. And so that's the challenge. Keep those faction lines and politicization out of those situations.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. David, I was with about at the year mark with the ladies of the Sutherland Springs First Baptist Church at their retreat. We were there with counselors to be with them during that time. And that was basically the day that we learned about the Santa Fe shooting. How do these events that unfortunately have happened since the tragedy in Sutherland Springs. How do these affect those who were present, who were a part of that, the family members as well?
Well, I think that the metaphor not driving in the rearview mirror really fits us well. Can't steer very well if you're looking through the rearview mirror trying to drive. Okay, that said, we try to look forward, as Pastor just said. We try to look to the good of things. We try to look to everything that life's fixing to give us and not what maybe was taken or how we were hurt or what that might be. And we get through those times. Now, I'm speaking particularly from a survivor's standpoint. We get through those times, and in this very fallen, evil world we live in, another tragedy comes. And I happened to be on a national news network 2 weeks ago, and I said, 10 days before there's a tragedy. I can't even name the places now. It happens so often. And then Dayton, and then El Paso. I wake up Sunday morning and get the computer out, and there's another 2 tragedies in a weekend. And you know, it does set you back. And I think anybody with any heart, it would set them back. But again, what I've learned is, as I was speaking to you earlier, is I don't want to dwell on my past. I actually want to say, what can we do for these people? And believe it or not, what I'm doing right now, this is my therapy. And when we go, and Frank said about hugging, we were in the back room a while ago in the green room talking about hugging. That's what we do. Not just because we're from South Texas, but that's just us. And you reach out to someone, and there's a difference when she just went through what I've already been through. She's been hurt, and I've been hurt. She's healing, and I'm healing at a faster pace, a quicker pace, or later on, or earlier, or whatever it is. We have an immediate connection. Sure. And then most of those aren't shot up in a church. We get to introduce Christ to them. More therapy for me. I'm bringing them the Word of God, and I'm getting the therapy out of the deal. So anyway, yes, as a survivor, it does hurt us. It does set us back, and most of us will say the same thing. But I think if the Vice President mentioned being on our knees recently, and I think it takes more of that than what people want to realize. And I think that'll help us get through it a little quicker and on to the next day, and then the next day.
Well, thank you for helping others who are going through tragic events across not only our country, but around the world. Thank you for that. Katie, you have a unique position and responsibility as the victim advocate for Wilson County. So you've seen tragedy before. You work with families, and you work with the families and those survivors from the Sutherland Springs event as well. Tell us about what emotions you have felt and how you have reached out beyond the hug, but the things that you do to help support the families.
So as the victim advocate for the district attorney's office, we cover 5 counties, so we're not just in Wilson County. We work with family members of murdered victims and children that have been sexually assaulted. And so for us, it is a very different aspect. It is about being able to connect people with the Texas Attorney General's office for Crime Victims Compensation Fund, with specifically the survivors and the victims from Sutherland Springs. It was kind of a new aspect. I'd only been doing it for 11 months at the time. And we actually had to return property from the church and to people. And so that process was kind of grueling, having to go through everybody's personal effects and having to sit with them and return things. And then it got to the point where I just wanted them back in the church where they belonged. So we took them all back to the church, and the point was that we wanted people to be able to go somewhere where they felt comfortable going to pick up the rest of their belongings and return the stuff that was in the church back to the church. So for me, that was kind of comforting. I got to load everything up and go meet with Sherry and Sherry and I unloaded everything, and hopefully everything's kind of made it back to where it belongs.
Thank you. And one thing that the district attorney and Katie, as a victim advocate, there were some folks that wanted more information about what had happened to their loved ones. And one of the things that you did is you reached out and made sure there was a counselor present.
I think that that is hugely important, because whenever we meet with victims, it's usually from a perspective of just being very factual about things. As much as you want to have the human part of it, sometimes in our realm, it is more about just being very factual and matter-of-factly about some things, which is very hard for me because I'm very emotional. And so there were people, and I just knew that some of the information that was being asked was going to be extremely hard to hear. And we wanted to make sure that we had the proper, we utilized everything that we had access to make it as comfortable and healing, because that was some of the requests that we fulfilled were for healing purposes. And we just wanted to make sure that it was truly a healing process, and we had counselors on the premises to do all that. We've also connected survivors with first responders in our office to make sure that they exchange things and words and hugs, and so it's phenomenal to see that kind of stuff take place. But then the rest of it is, it was just detrimental to have counseling on the premises, because you can't go through something like that and kind of relive that without having a counselor present. So it was important.
Right. Thank you, Katie. Thank you for your care and your caring of this community. David, tell us about, you do a lot of speaking now across the country and have shared your experiences and your hope and moving forward. What is the question that you're most tired of hearing? How about that?
I don't know if it's just one question. I really haven't grown tired of any of those questions. You know me, you've gotten to know me in the last 18 months pretty well, and I'd like to say what a shy individual I was before, but that wouldn't be true.
Your pastor's sitting right here.
I've actually been given a platform to go out and do something I truly enjoy doing. And I don't enjoy it necessarily for me, but I enjoy it for what I think it does for people. So I think a true answer is nobody has been, I've yet to meet anybody that's been rude or out of line, and I haven't heard a question I wouldn't answer, period. I'll answer any question. And there's been some pretty in-depth questions that have been asked, and I won't necessarily give them particulars about other victims or survivors in the situation, but all in all, I've already stated that this has been therapy for me, and I would say I've enjoyed just about everybody I've met.
Well, you've shared,
and I haven't just spoke at churches, by the way.
you shared, feelings that are very deep, very sad, but you've also brought with that message hope.
Absolutely. I made this remark earlier today. My pastor didn't coin the phrase that we want to look forward, but we do, and to look up, but we do. And I think I might add that without God and through Christ, I can't imagine getting through what we've been through. Without God, how could the world get through it with no hope, someone that has no hope at all? And fortunately, I've been blessed to have a relationship with Christ prior to this, and of course, through it all, and now today. What was your question?
Perfect. Thank you, David. Thank you. Pastor Pomeroy.
Can I say something real quick to springboard off of what he said? I think one of the things we need to remember, and David just said it very eloquently, is that we need to focus, and now when I say we, I'm saying anyone who's in the midst of being able to help somebody in a tragedy, to remember the Scripture says, whether you believe in Scripture or not, doesn't change the depth of the proverb, but it states that hope for things seen is not what's going to help you. It's in the hope of things that are unseen that brings patience. And I think our goal in going and helping others and reaching to others and loving on others and hugging others and being there for others is to remind them what you see, this circumstance you're in, that's not where you need to put your hope, because that is going to lead you in a spiral of depression. But put your hope in something that you can't see. Put it in your fellow man. Put it in God. Put it in beyond who you are. And that hope that they need to hear needs to come from us, and let them see that they can get through this. Because without hope, there is no life. They might exist, but there is no life.
Thank you. But wise words. Thank you for
You
sharing.
gave a pastor a mic, and I'm trying not to preach, but
Oh, goodness, we're grateful. We've talked recently, the Ecumenical Center, we've been out in El Paso helping for the last few weeks and taking counselors out and also helping them to build their own strategy for how the aftercare and recovery could be optimized, just because of having had experience with you all in Sutherland Springs. You're working with them. You've had many conversations with them. Can you tell us a little bit about those conversations?
wow. Probably not as well as you. The conversations I have been rather saddening, in the fact that in El Paso, the gentlemen, the people I've been speaking with, unfortunately, it was almost immediately the people and those who are hurt and those groups of people that are there that needed to be attended to and loved on and start that process of healing. Unfortunately, immediately the people that were there were people who came in to politicize certain ideologies, people who came in to divide and put factions apart from one another, whether it be race, whether it be financial, whether it be immigration status, whatever it may be. And rather than just going in and remember the human aspect of what was going on, those things took root first. And the unfortunate thing is what takes root first is going to overshadow everything else that comes in. So, and they're having a very difficult time now trying to heal and start that healing process, because there's been so much salt poured into the wound that the wound was tragic enough. And unfortunately, many have gone in now and made it even worse and opened it even deeper in aspects it never had taken before. So that doesn't mean we give up. That doesn't mean that we don't still go in and try to be the hands and feet of mercy and grace. It doesn't mean that we don't go in and try to instill hope amongst these people, but it makes the challenge that much harder, because the barriers and the hurdles have been set that much higher. So unfortunately, they need our prayers. And I know people say, well, prayers don't do anything. To the people who are in the midst of the situation that are hurting, just to know people are thinking about them, whether it be prayers or whatever, to know that they're not alone is what will bring and pull them through. And that's trying to be stymied by all the political things that are going on right now, in my opinion.
I think that's so helpful for the communities who are now experiencing these types of events, to have folks that have walked through that and can show that there is hope. There is still hope for them to have that. In El Paso, the Ecumenical Center was called in, but also Katie Edringer served on conference calls to talk about how we should best optimize some of the things we have to do, which is very, very unfortunate. As well as we had a representative from Pittsburgh, from the synagogue there, one from Orlando. So I think it's a sad time for our country, certainly. We would all agree to have to be having these types of conversations, but we so appreciate your messages of hope and moving forward, being able to get up the next day and put one foot in front of the other.
Amen.
Is there any one question, perhaps, to this morning that we haven't touched on that you think would be important for our audience to hear from you on?
I would add something. I don't know how to put it in question form. It's not Jeopardy,
Please.
so we're good.
Please.
One thing I think we need to remember is that I pray that nobody in this auditorium, or if it's being filmed or whatever, ever has to go through this sort of tragedy. But I think it's imperative that if you do, or if you know someone who does, protect them. The media, there are ethical media out there, media people within that discipline. There are those, though, who are looking for that next story and don't really care about how to get it. And I would say we need to put a hedge of protection about the survivors, the families of victims, and let them be able to heal and work through and share when they are ready, rather than allowing them to be just fed to the entities that be. That was one of the things that really helped us as well, is I had a couple of men come alongside me, Brother Mark and Kevin, who were able to bring the Rangers and the state troopers and everybody together to put a hedge of protection somewhat, to keep a distance, to help buffer some of that. And I think that really helps as well.
Absolutely. It's a collective effort. David?
That's not a surprise, right?
No, not at all.
I kind of like the group of people that are here today just to take a look at something. Now, I don't need to go into great detail, but I was severely hurt, shot multiple times, 2 months in the hospital, learning to walk, do personals, everything. So I almost died. Okay, so we got that out of the way. But that said, today, Mary, Beth, being a counselor and working through the counselors and putting this counseling sessions together and starting the center in Lavernia and in different places. Our whole church, I wasn't an exception being shot up. We were all shot up. That said, we all needed help. Here's first-class counseling. Oh, guess what? We don't know how to get through some of this stuff. We don't know the legalities. We don't know this. We don't know that. Here's our advocate. What is an advocate? A very special person, an unbelievably very special person. And so then I sit here, and here's my pastor, burying 26 people, getting through a death of his daughter, all the stuff that he went through, and yet still putting the church on his back and through the Lord, of course, and helping carry all these different situations and stuff. So I would by no means make our recoveries, and that's with an S, our recoveries as a singular thing. It has been totally through cooperation of these folks and others that have helped us get through this. I don't think any single person can sit here and say they healed themselves and they got over all this themselves. Those people that haven't received help or refused help, including first responders, including people that showed up to see this massacre, have been longer in their recovery and have been hurt more than even some of those that were in the actual shooting. So anyway, I thank God for these folks. I thank God I'm here 20 months later to talk about it in front of you guys. And I hope whatever we brought to the table today will help you all. And I hope you're never involved in a situation like that. But if you are able to help somebody, I hope maybe we brought something to light for you.
Thank you so much, David. Katie, any final remarks?
I would like to say, on like several state and national levels, Mary Beth and I have spoken on several different platforms as far as how to deal with something when you're not directly involved with an incident. And so for me, whenever we're speaking and everybody asks me, you know, how's the church, how are the people at the church doing, and how's your community healing and stuff like that. We were talking about this earlier back in the green room, and I told Frank, I said, the one thing that just keeps rolling out of my mouth is that they're good and they have made sure that we're good. And that is extremely powerful because they are the most faithful people I think I've ever met in my life. And that resonates out from the inside of that church out into our community. They have made sure that first responders are invited back to the church for certain events, and they invite them anytime. That they're reaching out to the first responders and everybody that was involved, inviting them back to the church to make sure that they see that they're okay. And for me, that has been enormously helpful because I know that they're okay. And I think at the end of the day, that is what it's all about, is making sure that we make it to the end of the day and that we're all okay. And so that has most definitely come from the inside of the church out into our community. So that's a huge part of the healing in our community.
Thank you, Katie. And thank you to all. May I have a show of hands of those who are clinicians that help others in our community? We have a number of clinicians. We thank each and every one of you what you do to help support folks who've gone through trauma experiences, who are just depressed and have anxiety from the trails that we take through life. And so thank you for what you do. You make a difference. And we're very, very grateful to our panelists here today. We had a short amount of time, and thank you for covering as much as we've been able to. We're very grateful. We look forward to our continued work together in helping serve our communities. We're in fact going to have an opportunity to go out to El Paso soon, and at their invitation, and be together with our survivors and our counselors in the coming weeks. We want to make an announcement to please stop at the tables by the lobby for more information. There's a table from the Ecumenical Center and many other providers out there if you haven't already visited. And also make sure that you filled out your evaluations and that you turn those in and sign out for that out in the lobby. And you can certainly visit our websites for more information on trauma. But once again, please join me in thanking our panelists today. That was me. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.